Melissa McCullough from Town of Chapel Hill.
Here.
Mayor Mark Bell from Town of Hillsborough. Your chair, right?
Yep.
James out of Bedford from Orange County.
Here.
Councilor Javier Caballero from City of Durham. Councilor Danny Noel from Town of Carrboro.
Here.
Perfect. And then I think we just need to give Chair Howard an excused absence.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving along, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
Okay. Is there anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, we have an online public comment ID.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We
Can I hear you?
Can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Good morning.
Nope.
We cannot hear you.
Oh, Amy's saying yes, but no one else can hear me. Let me try again. Can you hear me now?
Nope.
No.
Oh,
Interesting. They can hear me on Zoom.
Thank you.
Okay, Tom can hear.
So
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear us now?
yes, can you hear me?
We still cannot hear you, Ms. Pryor. We're gonna try this 2 more times, and then could you just send comments to us via email?
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Someone is asking, did you turn on your speaker?
Still
I don't
cannot
know.
hear you.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
The brain trust working on.
Can you use a chat?
Yeah, you have 2 options. You can send comments via email, or you can put your comments in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm gonna keep us going. Next up, we have the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you.
If I could just call out one thing on consent, there were some comments from NCDOT regarding the MPA planning boundary and organization memorandum of agreements. The NCDOT is not a party to these agreements. However, they did want us to clarify that the planning area boundary between DCHC and Burlington has not changed with the 2020 census. And that also to clarify language that the what was previously described as planning area boundaries, the census now wants us to call metropolitan planning areas. So we have updated that in the memorandums we'll send for DocuSign, but I did want to respond to their comments. Thank you.
I did have a motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next up, we have the presentation. Triangle Regional Transit Survey 2023. Alpeshes. Yeah.
This is helping to build the drama.
Yeah. Slowly growing.
Well, I'll be working on the slides. I'm going to jump in. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. My name is Alpesh Patel. I'm with Cambridge Systematics, and I am one of the consultants planning communities and ETC were the other two consulting firms. All three of us supported what is referred to as a Triangle Regional Transit Survey. And along with our firms, you can see the logos of all of the GO agencies and other transit agencies that were involved in this survey, which took place over 2 months last fall. So GO Durham and DCHC members were also part of an interagency committee that helped to give input and advice into the development of the survey. So I wanted to point out a couple of folks here in this room. Nish Trivetti with Orange County was one of the interagency members. We also had Jennifer Green from GO Durham participating as well. Paul Black, who I think a number of you know with GO Triangle, was one of the vocal participants. So we've had a good cross section of representation for the survey. If you'll go to the next slide. So my goal this morning for the first 10 minutes or so is just to go over the takeaways from this survey, some of the key results that were created by doing this origin destination survey, how that information can be used both by DCHC and other transit agencies. Then if we have a few minutes at the end, we'd love to take some questions for you. I'll also highlight one of the key products that came out of this survey, which is a dashboard. That dashboard is live today. It is available to any member of the public, and it allows you to query and sort and filter on all the survey results. So I'll share the URL with you as well. Next slide. So why would we conduct this survey, and what are the differences between this origin destination survey, which occurs about every 5 years or so, versus a customer preference survey, which occurs every year? So first, the purpose of the origin destination survey is to help update the Triangle regional model, which is a tool that's used to forecast traffic demand and also socioeconomic growth in the area, as well as to inform the stops model, which is what FTA uses to help evaluate and rate new starts and small starts transit projects nationally. This origin destination survey also helps provide insight on ridership and utilization trends that can be used by local transit operators, as well as to inform the update to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which DCHC oversees, as well as just informing regional planning for GO Triangle as well. So the project sponsor, again, for this was the City of Raleigh, but the interagency committee that represented all of the other local transit agencies was very active over the course of survey development. And there are similarities between an origin destination survey and a customer preference survey. Both of the surveys collect data, as you can see, on ridership, on ethnicity, on employment status and gender. They ask questions about trip purpose, such as whether the rider is using the transit system to get to work, go to school, or complete other errands. But the origin destination survey does not collect information about customer satisfaction, but rather it builds upon a methodology that has been used for over a decade in doing regional survey efforts here at a county level. And then the origin destination survey also included an on to off survey for selected routes, which anonymously recorded trip information for shorter segments of travel. And that analysis helped us to inform sampling plans and data weighting that was used to expand and represent the origin destination information for the entire region. All of the records from this survey were geocoded, so they are spatially enabled and can all be mapped, which is another feature of the dashboard that I mentioned. And this was also the region's first tablet-based survey. So we had riders from ETC climbing onto buses on different routes that are managed by different agencies and using a tablet-based approach to sample different participants from ages 18 to 65. Next slide. So a couple of highlights from this effort, just a few things to flag that I think are noteworthy. There were nearly 9,900 surveys that were completed over 112 routes across the 9 transit agencies. And again, this was accomplished in a little over 2 months. We met or exceeded sampling targets for select agency routes, an average of 121%, which is higher than average for regional surveys of this size and scale across the country. We had a robust 70% participation rate, which is also higher than the benchmark for surveys of this size around the country. And as I mentioned, we administered that on to off survey for shorter trips. That was done over 40 routes that helped provide that additional data for weightage on the sampling. Next slide. So you can imagine with all of that data, we took the time in January and February to apply a rigorous QC process, data cleansing, and then interpretation of all those results. And part of the outcomes of those steps included the development of agency-specific reports, fact sheets, memos, as well as an all systems report. So those products were distributed last month to all of the partnering and contributing agencies. And they're also available as well through the city of Raleigh. The other outcome, as I mentioned, was development of this public-facing dashboard in which you can sort and query and analyze all of this data and map it across different routes, as well as do a series of trend analyses looking at ridership from this survey compared to surveys in the past. So these next set of slides, if you'll go to the next one, they are a few snapshot findings that cut across the survey. They're not specific to one route or one agency, but I just wanted to flag these for you as some high-level takeaways. And as you can see on the left, 27% of the participants told us that they do not own a vehicle, or they do own a vehicle, I'm sorry, which they could have used to complete this trip. So those are choice riders. They opted to take transit even though they do own a vehicle. But the converse of that means there's also 73% of individuals who do not own a vehicle and are highly dependent upon transit. 42% of the participants said they do not have a driver's license. So again, they are using public transit to get from point A to point B. Yes.
But we just want to clarify your statement about the 73%. Is that people who don't own a car or don't own a car that they could have used for a trip, so that perhaps a spouse is using a car?
They do not own a car now. The
I don't
survey,
know what that says.
yeah, 27% own a car which they could have used to complete this
Right.
trip.
And so 73% would be they don't own a car which they could have used for this trip, which implies that they own a car but somebody else was using it.
Potentially, yes. I'm sorry. That's correct. That's a true interpretation. That's correct. Okay, next slide. So about a third of the participants told us that their household income was less than 25,000. So again, we're providing transit for those that are living at the poverty level and supporting a lot of minimum wage employees. About 30% of them told us that they refuse to disclose their income. And this is a trend that we're seeing nationally as well, especially during COVID, as transit systems chose to create free fare service. Surveys that have been done since that time have indicated that individuals that are riding transit are less forthcoming about their income because they're wanting to make sure that the system continues to be free fare. Do you have a question?
Was like, that's good on the public, sorry.
Right. Next slide. Okay, so 63% of those who participate in the survey are between the ages of 18 and 34 years old. About 43% ethnicity-wise are African-American riders, and the other 30% are white or non-minority riders. And again, this is fairly indicative of results from regional surveys and other urbanized areas of the country.
Do you have any demographic data for either African-American or white? Or did you only break it up that way?
No, we have a breakdown for them.
Okay.
We can provide. So I think the main takeaway here is that these numbers are pretty indicative of other urbanized areas of our scale and size around the country. In fact, in this region, we're beginning to see a larger uptick amongst those in the 20 and 30 something range because they are choosing to live in a densified environment with one less vehicle and more reliant on transit. In some cases, that younger demographic is also using micromobility, electric scooters to go shorter distances, or they're taking that scooter to the transit stop in order to combine their trip. So some of those trends were picked up in our survey as well. And then the demographic breakdown again is indicative of a number of other similar sized regions. Next slide. So what this tells us is that work commutes are not the dominant trip for all system use. There are an increasing number of trips that are taking place that are not work-based. They are used to run errands. And some of this is related to the fact that more individuals are working from home in this post-COVID environment. There are more individuals that are working in a third office. Perhaps it's a coffee shop, perhaps it's a bar. And then they're using transit to utilize a trip or an errand or something that may not be related to their home. So that trend we think may continue to increase as some of these post-COVID trends become more permanent. Next slide. So over 90% walk to cover the distance between the bus stop and their place of origin or destination. And over 70% cover the origin destination to their bus stop between 1 to 5 minutes. So this is a really important point that not only should transit be an important element that's an option for users and riders around the region, but other infrastructure such as sidewalks, such as good signage should be in place in order to make that passage between your origin destination and the transit stop safe and easily accessible. And so the continued investment in infrastructure that gets a user to the transit pickup and that bus stop is just as important as the ride itself.
I have a question about that. So is the converse also true that if you're not within 5 minutes walking of a bus stop, that you're not going to use transit?
That's one interpretation. It's hard to prove that just from the sample data that we have. But you can't definitively say that they won't. We're trying to sample, I think, those who have chosen to make that trip, so.
And if you're measuring distance by time, is that established as a uniform measure of length of trip, or are there other impediments that could cause that time to increase, like a lack of sidewalk or other infrastructure?
Yeah, it's an average, Doug. So you're right, there could be some other impediments and gaps basically that could alter those minutes.
I know this survey is not it, but, and maybe Doug knows the answer. Do we do any surveys? Does anybody do any surveys either nationally that we could use as a benchmark or in the triangle that we could apply here, where we survey non-riders to find out why they're not using transit? You know, this is good because both the customer satisfaction, it tells us all sorts of things about the people who do use transit. But if we're trying to get more people to use transit, we need to do surveys of people who aren't currently to find out why they aren't and what it would take to get them to use transit. And that gets to your question, Carl.
Right, and I wonder whether we have data, I don't know, like the percentage of the population of the triangle that doesn't live within 5-minute walk of a transit stop. I don't know if we have that data, but that'd be interesting to know, like what share of the population is probably equal us, right? I mean,
And it varies by community.
Orange County learned some of this data issue locally through the comprehensive land use plan that we're doing in the 2050, through the public engagement and surveys we've done through that process. We've learned how important transit is and multimodal is through that process to understand the local environment, the rural environment. We've also learned through some of the surveys that we've done in the strategic plan of how the quarter mile, half mile is important in rural transit, rural needs like that. So we have some of that data available locally and how we're comparing that to how it does nationally in other states that have similar data.
It's great, thank you.
Okay, next slide. I mentioned the oversampling target that we were able to exceed, and this shows you both the surveys that were collected as well as the collection goal and those sampling targets by different agencies and then the average. And I mentioned that this is a regional survey. It also included participation from PART. So service as far west as the Triad. Next slide. I also mentioned the deliverables. This is a snapshot of the cover of the different reports, memos, and fact sheets that were provided and circulated last month. So both Go Durham and Orange County Transit, as well as Chapel Hill Transit, received this type of media to be able to parse through and share with their boards and staff. The next slide shows you the link to this dashboard. I mentioned that you have the ability to look at all of the survey data by agency, by individual route. There's also the capability to do trend analyses as well as map the data to look at the on to off information and to be able to distill all of that both through the ability to report and share this information. So there's ad hoc reporting capability that's built into the dashboard. And it's supported again by all of the agencies that participated. This dashboard will remain live until the next survey is conducted about 5 years from now. So it's already proven to be a value add. I know Paul Black and a couple of the staff at Go Triangle have really dived deep into this dashboard and already using it to inform some of their planning work. And we're starting to see that from feedback with the other staff as well. All right, glad to take any other final questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. This is really fascinating to see the snapshots, how different they are for each of the transit systems. I was curious about how we are going to be sharing those report cards and also the dashboard as well. Are they going to be yeah, just wondering how the information is going to be shared. Doug.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. How are the snapshots and also the dashboard, like the report cards and the dashboard, going to be shared out with the public, accessible to the public?
We would be happy to include those on our website moving forward and the report cards. Different transit systems. I believe they have been shared respectively with providers in our realm, Chapel Hill Transit, Go Triangle, Go Durham.
Yeah, all the transit operators were provided before. It's late February and early March.
We'd be happy to help promote them.
Yes, that would be great if we could request that everyone please share them with the public and this portal. I was also wondering, I didn't see Duke. I noticed that the Wolf Line participated, was now shown as a partner. I didn't see anything about Duke Transit.
Duke declined to participate in this effort. They also, because they were not receiving federal funding at that point, that the potential disruption to their riders and privacy were very. So we have reached out and we will hopefully establish a relationship so that future surveys are something that their administration will participate.
Okay. Yeah, I would encourage a follow-up conversation on that, how we all need to work together.
Yeah, they do account for approximately 4 million public transportation trips in Durham. So it is definitely valuable information to both benefit their system and riders, as well as a more complete picture of public transportation resources in.
I wonder on that one, like, you know, and this may be an issue of sort of the board and the sort of staff this might be an issue for the board and staff, but like, if that comes up in the future, it seems like as electeds, we're having constant communications with Duke University on a range of things, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if that would happen in the future, like, if y'all would let us know, that's a quick call to people like in community affairs or Duke Durham Regional Affairs and saying, hey, can y'all participate in this thing? That sounds like a real missed opportunity.
So I think several of your electeds would be delighted to.
We felt that by the time I felt that by the time the conversation reached that point, because initially they had indicated that they may participate, that it was at a pivot or a tipping point in the process where the vendors, our contractors needed to know to go ahead or not. When Duke withdrew, and rather than pushing at a very rapid pace, we did not want to damage the long-term prospect of cooperating with the university. So I definitely appreciate that. We are working through Stephanie Williams in our office to cultivate that relationship, and we'll definitely take you up on that.
Yeah.
In the
whether y'all
future.
have time.
Yeah, I think there definitely needs to be a follow-up conversation, whether it's at the staff level or whatever, because you know, we're doing in our work plan, we are doing a BRT study that is going to include looking at connecting Duke, Durham Tech and CCU. That's one of the connections that we're going to look at. So, because one of my follow-up questions was, how does this work? I really want to hear from staff, like the information from the report cards. What are the ways that staff sees this informing our work as we go forward? When we're evaluating or how can this be, kind of integrated into the different studies and things like that? Yeah, that was a question that I had.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It goes into understanding how public transportation fits into our system, what the likelihood is that people will use public transportation. Also, those model outputs are part of what goes into stops modeling for future transit corridor planning,
So
which would be necessary for any potential capital investment grant, new starts grant, small starts grant through FTA.
So my second then question or recommendation would be if we could also make sure that this gets shared with planning departments. Because it has a lot of land use implications, right? All the data around, people walking to, to the bus stops and things like that. So I think that helps with, with the Durham City County Planning Department, some of the work that we're doing around land use planning and implementing our comp plan.
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity, particularly with the amount of update and repositioning in our land use planning, that a broader education and enrichment effort around this kind of data and our travel demand modeling will benefit local planners and decision makers. So we would like to enhance opportunities to present information and communicate both to technical staff and community stakeholders to the work we do and how we can use the information to inform decisions through, some structured education and outreach workshops, hosting courses so that staff, and not just Durham City County staff or community staff, but even our MPO staff can understand more about travel demand modeling. It really is a very valuable tool that has a lot of land use implications. And you'll see some scenarios about land use planning that we've developed to illustrate potential decisions in long range transportation planning at your upcoming May joint meeting with CAMPO.
Doug, it might help just one other comment to build on that is, we did brief, the city of Raleigh, TPAC committee in Wake County last month, as well as the technical committee and the board of Go Triangle last month. And then next week, I'm going to present at the Campo Technical Committee, and then 2 weeks after that, the Campo Board. So continuing to sort of get the word out about the study and the results.
So I just wanted to tell you that Brian Litchfield from Chapel Hill Transit has already shared this with our council and our partners, the Chapel Hill Transit partners. So thank you. It was really nice to have that data. I am wondering if we are, so many of the, so this was taken when fares are still free, right? So one of our council members asked Brian about the viability of fare-free transit and whether we could benefit from going ahead and charging fares. And he did a really wonderful analysis that showed us that it would either be very little benefit to have fares or hurt us to have fares. Now, partly that's because we don't have buses and operators with the equipment for collecting fares, but a lot of it has to do with timing. A lot of it has to do with ridership and how the ridership, falling ridership or the increased ridership that you get with fare-free transit then makes you more eligible for federal funds. And so I'm wondering if there's any indication of doing or focusing, and we do another one in 5 years, on the impacts on ridership of fare-free and non-fare-free. And it's not just, whether or not fares are burdensome to people who actually really need to ride the bus, or whether the fact that all of a sudden when you have to do fares, it's just awkward and I don't have a card and I don't have change and, why don't I just take the car? And so there are a lot of machinations going on, I think, as we change back in some places back to fares, how it might affect ridership and our funding and all this other planning that we're trying to do.
This issue came up at the Orange County Staff Working Group meeting yesterday. And it was shared by Go Triangle, the amount of work and effort that it has taken for them to prepare for fares to return to our system July 1. I believe we have a very living laboratory of an example. Positive outcomes and opportunities for improvements.
Raleigh is also planning to reinstitute fares come July 1st.
Yeah.
Is that, have they taken that action?
As far as I know, I mean, that's what I've been told by members of the Raleigh, representatives from Raleigh and the Go Triangle Board. So
I mean, I think they were headed in that direction,
Yeah.
but it's not been actually voted
I
on.
think it'll be part of the budget vote, but
David Eatman and David Walker, I think the city of Raleigh cited the same challenge.
Yeah.
Regarding free fares and that shift back, as well as the federal funds and trying to find that right balance. So I think it's a challenge that a number of agencies are facing around the country. It's a policy decision. There's implications in both directions.
I'm just curious, and I don't know how everybody else works, but it'd be interesting to see, like, for City of Durham, one of our realizations, and we're remaining fare free this year, is the carbacks we already had. So who was actually even paying fares beforehand? We had such large carve outs with our senior population and our student population that the place that you're collecting fares, you're not getting a lot from. So that's something I'd be interested to see in other systems. If you're already letting seniors ride free and you're already I think ours was either 21 or 24, I can't remember, ride free. Your age pool is just really small. And so you're not getting a lot anyway. So that was something that I'd be interested to see with like Go Triangle and Go Raleigh and others, what age cutoffs they had before. Is that all? Anyone else have any questions? No? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Open your next. Amendment number 2, FY 24-23 Transportation Improvement Program. Tip.
Should be quick. This is the second amendment for our program. Including this amendment, there are couple of new projects. Both Michael has purchased some new vehicles, and then Chapel Transit has had some grant awardees for the project, and also including the amendment is just the standard admin updates from DCDOT. Our amendment went out for public comment at the end of March. This is sneak peek for next item. But our amendment went up for public comment end of March, and there was one item from comment received. Unfortunately, it was not relevant to any of the amendment, but it did give us feedback on another area that a resident would like to see improvements on. And so there were no more updates since the TC for this amendment, and so we called for.
Okay, thank you. So I just need a motion to adopt the tip amendment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so much. Thank you. And you're just gonna stay there. We need his FY 2025 call for project recommendations.
So to start off, I'm just going through a bit of background onto the creation of and development of these call projects. Our started with our federal funding policy, which was amended late last year. It is intended just to create a data-driven process and kind of guide our funding recommendations for seeding new projects, as well as providing funding for existing projects. We do receive the following funding, federal fundings, the block grant distribution approval, the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, also known as CMAQ, Educational Alternatives Program, and Carbon Reduction Program. These are the four sources of funding that we receive and distribute to our members based off of the data-driven process. And just note that this is a separate process from the state prioritization process, which uses separate part of funding. And it also incorporates all projects throughout the state instead of just our areas. Some changes that occurred with our federal funding policy, with the project minimum in order to qualify to receive funding, it was increased from 100,000 to 250,000. Another change is we incorporated the funding request that we received outside of the call. There were times where a project was in a emergency situation where they needed emergency funds to complete a phase of the project. We could not wait for the call. They were awarded based on availability, and those awards were factored into the amount the agency received during this call. Some other changes we incorporated was in regard to the cost estimates. As we all know, prices have been rising for all phases of materials. And so to counter this, we increased the contingency for project in the construction phase, as well as projects include a 5% annual inflation rate for each year. And then lastly, some additions were just to the scoring rubric of the projects. We requested additional information, such as the more details on the schedule and timeline, as well as just provided additional scoring changes to provide the most accurate scores and update it to the current climate. And here is just an outline of the schedule so far. And see here, we are now on the final section of the approval. It has gone through the TC and this board, both for information, and it's gone through the public comment period, and now it's here for approval. And here's just a snapshot of the, there's some key figures in the funding, the amount and types of projects that we received during this call. New projects, existing projects, as well as the continuing programs. And in addition to that, plans and studies, since we have combined this call with our community. Also, you see here just the amount of funding that was available, the amount that was requested, and also the amount that we will be programming towards these projects. And if you notice that the amount being programmed is higher than the amount that is available, this programming was done with the guidance of the STIP unit, and also was just mainly to ensure that there was project ready for delivery at the time, just since we are programming 3 years out instead of the 1 year extra.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, go ahead.
So how can we spend more money than we have?
So there is a kind of cushion section, the guidance from FWHWA, I believe it is within 10% of our funds that we can use above that amount. And so
We would switch it from a different category then? I mean, or they would give us more money? I'm really not understanding.
so it's not, sorry.
So this is a program. It is done through reimbursement. We are allowed to program potential expenditures. The money isn't transferred out of
Got
account
it. I
until
got it.
it's submitted for reimbursement.
Okay.
Right now, we have quite a bit of money that is programmed in current and past years that has not been submitted for reimbursement. And a lot of those projects also do not appear to be moving forward into foreseeable expenditure. So
It'll become available.
we have a program, and then we believe that we have room within that program to add these projects, and that we will not be requesting reimbursement that exceeds our programmed amount. So we're allowed a little squishiness there,
Got it. I got it. Thank you.
but that's a great question. It is a little peculiar. Did I do a good job explaining that, Joe? Perfect. Okay.
So this slide is to highlight projects that will be receiving funds outside of this call. There is a Triangle Mobility Hub, which has the request in this call for 5.5 million of federal funds. And then something that they also are currently applying for a federal discretionary grant, as well as receiving the local funds from the three counties. With the Durham-Roxborough Rail Trail, this is a combined effort, Durham County, Carson County, and the City of Durham. And also there's involvement from the state in regards to the CMAQ, additional statewide CMAQ funds that are applied. This is separate from the CMAQ that we are delegating in our call. There's kind of two separate processes, CMAQ and statewide fund, and then there is a more area specific fund. And so this project will be pulling from the statewide pot as opposed to the other projects in this call. The public comment period for this call began late March and ended last week. So this presentation went out on the agenda last week, and since then, our public comment period has ended. By number, there are 49 comments that were received. Comments that didn't make it onto the agenda just due to the time needed to go out to everyone here are on the back printed out for anyone to view. And there are much support for both phases 2 and 3 and 4 of the Greenway, though there are also additional comments in there unrelated to the call. Here are the existing projects that we are recommending for this call. All existing projects are a priority for funding with this call, and so we agreed to fully fund all of the projects, with one exception, the Cornwallish Road project in the City of Durham. They agreed to reduce their funding for this year just to be able to provide additional funding for the other project in this call, just because we've received more projects requests than we had before. And so this project will be partially funded this year, and the remaining funds will be added in FY28. Here is just a slide just to give some additional context information on the projects, such as how long they have been receiving funding for and kind of the progress of these. Main purpose of the existing projects is just kind of, in general, to add money to existing projects, but also to help projects kind of push that kind of last right over the finish line. So we do see here there are several projects that are very close to being fully funded, with Rail Trail, for example, and the SC Drive bicycle pit project for Chapel Hill. There is one change to this list, just based off of recent conversations. The South Greensboro Street Sidewalk project is no longer requesting funds in this call. That project previously had COVID funds that were attached to it, and the DIP unit has worked out a deal with us for them to be able to supplement these funds. And so as a result, the request is no longer needed for this call. And so those funds are being returned to this pot. Here are the 10 new projects that we received funding. These were granted and ordered with their score with the four-year federal funding policy. And there is a good diversity of projects amongst our member areas, just to provide that equity. And then none of the projects have gone above their funding caps or project caps, just to further ensure equity. So as I mentioned before, with the South Greenville Street project, those funds will be returned to the pot, just due to current conversations that are still ongoing. Another one that is ongoing is for 3 existing projects from the city of Durham. These 3 were originally went through the spot process and were funded through STI. And at this point, instead of buying these with the federal funds, we are currently seeking about reapplying the STI funds to these projects. Should we become successful with this, if it occurs before the next call, then these projects will be returned to the pot, and the leftover money will be awarded to any project that did not receive funding in order of the score. And so see here are just a couple, not all of the projects that did not receive funding, but just a couple of projects that we expect to use up any additional funding that may come about.
Are those in order or that's just?
Yes, these are in order of the score, and so in order that they would receive any additional funding should something become available.
Through this process, we realized, working with our project sponsors, that they would often seek funding resources from different places to fund the same project. So we want to work while we're moving forward with recommending these projects based on the scoring for this call. And it's not just City of Durham, but if we are able to apply other funding, be it STI funding or transit plan funding to a particular project, that will free up funding that we can put back through the formula to fund the other work projects. So we're working with those local project sponsors. So in the case of the STI funding, the MPO is not the project applicant, where we can't provide the updated materials to NCDOT, but we can work with a project sponsor to make sure that they are following a process and encouraged to get that information in place. Because yeah, there were cost escalations for all STI funded projects from the last time prioritization funded anything, and that's impacted the state's budget, and there's a process for ferreting that out. So we're working and we want to make sure that worthy projects get funding. We preserve our flexibility to the extent possible. So I want to point that out. Thank you. Thanks so much.
And with that, I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
I do have a question, Philman. Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand. So when you, on the earlier slide, it shows the 38 million allocated to selected projects, right? So where on the existing and new ones, like where does that 38, how do I see?
Yeah, so it is the combined total of the funding going towards both new and existing. So
yeah, so like on the existing project slide, for example.
table. So on here, it would be, this is the federal amount. And so this cell added to the federal amount on the new project.
It's the federal, okay, gotcha.
Go ahead, Wendy, sorry. And then Dan.
First of all, I want to say thank you for this chart that has all the comprehensive information. It's really helpful to see, you know, when things have started, how much has already been allocated for projects. So thank you. My question was how are we now going to follow up on, you know, over the next year, just on project implementation, you know, tracking how things are getting done, supporting, you know, local governments with project delivery. So I just want to hear more about that part.
Great, we've assigned some resources in our next planning year work program to facilitate conversations that better help our project sponsors, both internally, projects that go through communities often touch lots of different staff people, lots of consulting support to make them into reality. So to facilitate those conversations with each internal to each project sponsor about how they can better deliver projects within their organization, as well as with the respective divisions of NCDOT, be it one of the 3 highway divisions that are within our geography, or the intermodal division, which also has some project delivery responsibilities, and come up with some sort of process that everyone can follow. And then hopefully that will improve the opportunities to report progress more consistently. What I'd really like to have is I know it's the trend right now, but some online web resources where project sponsors can update project status, and then we are able to dashboard progress, both for our membership and for the public, so they can see where projects are at. We're seeing that same approach taken with the county transit plan funding. Durham is in the process of standing its system up now. So I think we have some great examples, and oranges too. I'm not trying to exclude them. I think we've got some great examples on how to support local communities and provide them better opportunities to communicate their success and identify opportunities for improvement in advance, so we can kind of catch snags before they become backlogs. So I think that, those conversations are going to yield a lot of good information and team building, and hopefully move some of these projects along. We have tens of millions of dollars of projects that are kind of stuck. We need to unstuck them and get moving.
Have you all discussed, I don't know how that's currently done now, but actually in the project agreements, that's something that we're doing with the Durham County Transit Plan, is the way that we're structuring those.
Well, the current federal funding policy that the MPO has adopted does have basically a rescission or a clawback concept. I don't know that it's really fleshed out in a way that's effective. So we need to better understand that before we decide to implement something like a deadline, or identifying when something has stagnated to the point that the project's no longer feasible, and we need to put the money that's assigned to it back into our pool so that we don't stop other worthy projects from moving forward. And I think that project agreements may be a way to help do that. Certainly that's a tool that the state uses with its local agency programs to move projects forward.
I think it would be good, because I know a lot of these are multi-year. Just thinking about what would make sense, as I'd like to hear more as we're working through this on how do we best structure this going forward to, hold ourselves all accountable and also provide support, that's needed, and the reporting piece to the public. I don't know if it makes sense to, check in on this in 6 months and hear back from staff on what you all are thinking about, but I think this is really important, because we can see that we've got work to do on this.
We will, I'll present a proposed scope for that resource effort, the local project delivery improvement effort, for the end of this fiscal year, so we can move it into procurement at the beginning of next fiscal year. And I'd like to also point out that sometimes, these projects are complicated, they change, in mid-concept. There's no secret sauce across the country of anywhere that just has it all done great. We shouldn't shy away from challenging projects, because they're difficult. Our constituents don't want us to do that. They want us to take on the challenges. But there is some wisdom in using federal resources in the way that's most appropriate for them and leveraging other resources in ways that are also flexible, so that we can get more resources to our table. I will say I'm not aware of circumstances where communities or organizations spend so much money that they run out of money in the future. So in general, if we deliver projects, there will be more funding to deliver more projects following it. And I say that, in all of this conversation and encouragement and optimism, that we'll be able to continue and focus on our good work here in DCHC. So
Yeah.
I think we're headed in the right direction. I think our constituents deserve the investments that we can all be proud of. And we certainly want to work with all of our project sponsors on great projects that implement their comprehensive plans, that implement their capital improvement programming that they involve in each of their community's budgets annually.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge they're fantastic. I mean, it's mostly bike path, transit, multimodal. That's what's on here. And I also want to just acknowledge NCDOT and RTP for being partners, which is really exciting. So thank you.
Thanks, Annie.
I think I'm cross-referencing Carborough's agenda tonight, and I think I have this mostly figured out. So it is 206K from South Greensboro that is being removed from this schedule, right? The rest of that, that's the only sum that's going back into this, is that requested 206K?
Yeah, so I'm taking 165 because that's the federal amount. The 200 also includes the local match, which is
Okay, right on.
That's for South Greensboro Street,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's the existing South Greensboro Street
Yes.
project. Now, I believe we are aware that there may be some funding applied or potential also from the Orange County Transit Plan for that project. So we would like to communicate with staff, figure out those details. To just make sure that the best funding is applied. Because there's also potentially reallocating other funding, both already awarded to Carborough and maybe the other projects that get freed up that could apply towards Carborough projects.
Part of what I'm thinking, but in addition to that, also just understanding, so I guess that 165, whether it's other Carborough projects or just other things in the RFP, how do we regard that now at this point in the process, that newly freed up money? I mean, I guess relative to other awarded projects that haven't moved, just like, I'm just unclear on sort of like the schedule of these resources and programming them.
Well, this looks like it's adding 165 to already multi-million-dollar award. So that should translate into your CIP annual budget. That's for your internal process. I believe that's part of the anticipated shortfall, even though, Tina, did I recall that bids were coming in for that work soon?
This is a project that has been under design for a while and needs a water line replacement, which we discovered at 65% design. The water line, so that required expanding the design scope. We have completed that. The design for the water line is now about 95%. So this effort was just to replace the COVID funds that was earmarked to this project. That rather than be rescinded, we reallocated to DOT. And we were using this process to get that money back. In our conversation with DOT the other day, DOT offered to pay that in full, so they actually offered to pay the full 206,343, and the town's match would be increased from the 41 to 51%. The town, in an effort to update the municipal agreement, has an item going to the town council tonight that reflects these updated amounts.
Yeah, and all of that I'm clear on and grateful for. I guess I'm really just checking on making sure that we are not underutilizing the money that has been freed up within the RFF. Separate from the South Greensboro project. I'm absolutely satisfied that that's moving forward appropriately. But it sounds like my concern is misplaced.
Right, the funding is all utilized at this point. We've not identified any replacement funding yet. Now, the next step after this call for projects will be moving forward into TIP amendments. So there will be a public review process for that. And then that'll give us time to go through and check the STI funding question on the STI funded projects or transit plan funded projects. And, there may be, revised list that moves into the actual programming.
Good. Thank you.
Well, that will all come back through public involvement and through this board.
Michael?
Just sort of building on something, the topic that Wendy brought up a few minutes ago. Have we looked at using, a jurisdiction success in getting projects completed as part of the scoring rubric for future projects? So that we don't, keep making this, investing in making bad investment, shall we say. So basically, if a town, county, whatever, has a track record of not getting projects developed, that should be something that I would think we might want to use thinking about awarding funding for new projects.
We certainly want, as part of our collective process, to encourage project delivery.
Yeah.
Whether that's actually in the rubric or other resources, that'll take a discussion and policy amendments.
Yeah, but I'm saying, I think it's worth looking at to make,
I don't disagree. We should evaluate that.
And yes, and also, just thinking of No Child Left Behind and how punitive it was, and not being punitive with that, but how do we support whatever jurisdiction to better, yes, just to say that out loud.
Yeah.
That was the logic behind the request to invest resources in success first. And have those conversations before, so we're cultivating our carrots and
Yes.
not really pulling out our sticks yet.
Anybody else?
I'll move approval of the projects as presented with that one change.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now, moving into our informational items, we have the congestion management process. Good morning.
I'm update the congestion management process and our report MRC. So end of this month, April 30, we will have a third workshop, which include all the CMP subcommittee member and other related staff member in other agencies. This will be a final workshop for this CMP MRC update. Every 4 years we have run. For this round, this will be a final workshop. So after this workshop, we will collect the comments, finalize report, then go through TC and board meeting, start about
adoption process for the CMP. For this presentation, there are two topics to update. One is estimation of bike level of traffic stress. We call it LTS, bike LTS. Secondly, we will have the preliminary recommendation from consultant for CMP as the second topic. As I already mentioned, the final report will goes to TC, through TC and board members in May or in June. So first is a bike level of traffic stress. Bike level of traffic stress, sorry, LTS. So originally, this measures was developed by Anita Institute in California, and then Florida State DOT has a manual. It's called multimodal capacity measure. So that's a very good guidebooks for planning application. So the consultant picked the FDOT's guidebook to estimate the LTS, bike LTS for this area. So these measures was widely used in different area in Florida, down south, and go to the north, Boston area, all had this kind of measures. But for all areas, this is first time we had it here, a preliminary estimation. We already share it with our subcommittee member, and we get some comments with a feedback to consultant. In generally, this LTS measures is based on the speeds, traffic speeds, and traffic volume. Definitely high speeds, high volume is high stress for bike trip. And secondly, type of bike facilities, whether you have bike lane or you have multi-use paths, there you get relatively lower level of stress. And the route we call section, land use context. And because of the information is not very detailed, we have, so the consultant has to make some professional judgment for some type of facilities. So we have an online map showing there. Link we can click for get detail, zoom in for the detail of the area you are interested in. These are examples of preliminary result for Durham downtown. So the freeway definitely is not allowed for bike trips. So it's private levels there. And in general, we have 5 levels of the stress. 5 is the highest one. So when a roadway facility get 5, typically it suggests only suitable for the experienced cyclist. So if 4 relatively high or moderate high, it means for some of the adults. 3 moderate is for many adults. Down to the lower level, 5 is almost for everybody. So that's general measures. From this map, you can see Durham Freeway is not showing there because it's not allowed for bike trip. And if you look, NC 98, it shows a high stress there. This one is for Champ Hill. Similar, if you look at NC 54 from I-40 all the way to Champ Hill, get a high stress there, 5501 as well. It's on the speed and traffic volume. And this measures only applies to the roadway facilities. In other words, the multi-use path greenway and trail is not there. It's not for members. It's good facilities for bikes.
Yeah.
So this is the second topic I would like to present in this meeting. It's a recommendation, preliminary recommendation from the consultant. It's their involvement of the mitigation strategies for these color marked sections. The color marked sections of the corridor is they call it noticeable area or subsections of corridor, which think improvement is needed based on the 2019 and 2021 data together. So if you look these for the US 70 in the dorm, what they suggest is number one is assessment management improvement. Secondly, is a relatively new concept. We haven't used it in the previous MTP and CMP. It's called integrated corridor management. It's under intelligent transportation system. So it means in generally when you manage a corridor, two-way traffic, car traffic is car traffic, transit is transit, bike and bike, and parking right is parking right separately. So when we see an integrated corridor management, it means multimodal management together, integrate together. So that helps to improve the efficiency of the corridors and as well as reliabilities of the corridors. So second is RCM, the third is BRT. The last one is connectivity. Connectivity here means the nearby collect route connectivity. So in other words, if you have a better connectivities around US 70s, it helps to get less trip onto the unnecessary trips onto the US 70s. So down south for I-40, they only recommended ramp meter and modernizations of ramp. And go west, I-40 from Fairway Road all the way to the NC-54, also recommended similar ramp meter, modernization of ramp, BRT, or keep the bus on shoulder, BOS is a short form of BOOS. So that's what they recommended for NC-54, starting from Champ Hill, Barbie Chapel Road, all the way north to Durham I-40. What they recommended is widen it to 6 lane. But we asked them to check what we had in the MTP. So in MTP, 2050 MTP, we had a modernization project there. It's some sort like a super street. So they add this one, 6 lane and super street in their document. So either 6 lane or super street is said. RCS is here, is add restrict crossing intersections. SUP is shared use path all along the corridors and BRT RCM. So that's all they recommended for the corridor levels, section of corridor, all this information preliminary. We will have the workshop and collect the comments and suggestions from the subcommittee and then make necessary change information for this recommendation and then through the TC and
Michael.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the methodology or the criteria you use when you're making these recommendations, you know, why you pick an investment in road widening versus train, whatever it is, you know, and how do you think about the cost trade-offs, I mean, like
That's a catch.
the widening of I-40 in Orange, could have bought us 2 BRTs. So how do we think about those trade-offs when you're coming up with these recommendations?
And can I add to that, the effectiveness of these kinds of quote mitigation strategies that are in fact counterproductive over the long term?
So for the first one, the first basement is existing traffic conditions. My understanding is based on the traffic volume, based on the reliability, as well as the traffic crash indicators. That's their basement. Or make recommendation where they want to make improvement. As I mentioned, it's based not 1 year because COVID is 2019 and 2021. But special case is for the eastern end connector in Durham. It was it's open for traffic in 2022 July, I think. So we provide 2023 data for them to review around eastern end connectors, but we haven't get it. So generally, choose the location on your current traffic conditions and some traffic volume of the future year, but mostly based on this year volume, reliability, and safety data. But what kind of mitigation strategy will apply to these noticeable sections of the corridor? What they said is their professional judgment. So there is no detailed description there, but we may ask them to document it in the report. For example, if they suggest ramp meters there and the mainland traffic is not that of concern, so it may not be necessary to recommend ramp meter. But if both mainland and ramp traffic is high, so you may recommend it for this, but they have their professional judgment made for this recommendation because you see, it's not the same. Secondly, this recommendation section is very short. The recommendation may suggest for longer of the corridor sections. For example, if you suggest integrate corridor management, it's not just for this short section. It requires longer sections for this. You may extend it all there. It's all even longer. So all this, as I mentioned, is a preliminary. I can ask them to document the advice, how you pick. So you remember we had this strategy box. There's a lot of strategy in the box. Why you pick this one for this corridor? It's not clear.
What factor do they consider trade-offs? Again, whether it's dollars or, time saved or whatever, how are they determining cost effectiveness?
There is a cost factor inside. In the new strategy box, it's not in this presentation. They have one strategy is high cost or lower cost. It's showing in their new document. In the meeting package, I think, so there are cost related factors as well.
Oh, I would second everything he said. Some of the examples that are here call into question the entire methodology for me. I mean, if you look at Raleigh Road, that green one, where they're suggesting 6 lanes, already that's a huge steep slope. There's no room to make it 6 lanes if you wanted to, because it goes up like this on both sides. And already we're having people, it's a 35-mile-an-hour zone, and we've already got people going 50 and more down that. And if they're not taking into consideration the conditions of the actual locations and the long-term repercussions of what they're suggesting. I'm sorry. And as I said, the counterproductiveness of widening stuff when it doesn't have any long-term benefit.
And that's
Compared to the
outstanding
cost especially.
6 lane. So what we ask them, because when they pop up the 6 lane, we inspect. Basically, we provide our MTP project list from 2050. What we suggest in the MTP, which are approved by TC and the board, and they look at that list. They said 6 lane or super street. So that's what the
Streets are terrible for bicycles.
They're terrible for people, they're terrible for the environment, they're terrible, terrible, terrible.
If I could, and I see that Councilor Berry has her hand up online, if you could just interject something real quick before you call on her. This process is the congestion mitigation process that we're required to go through as part of our metropolitan transportation planning. This process doesn't suggest that we have to make these investments. And I think that we should definitely get some feedback from the consultant and a more practical application of what these investments could mean and why they're advising them. You know, this MPO has made it clear that mitigating congestion is not necessarily our top priority. That promoting public transportation, multimodalism, effective land use, et cetera, are our priorities and our goals. So this process doesn't replace those other goals. This is a process we have to address, and we have funding that's awarded to us that is intended to be directed at solving congestion issues.
But again, there are lots of ways of solving congestion issues, and some of these, you know, and again, when you're coming up even with draft, and I understand it's only one part of a much larger process, but number one, let's do it sensibly and make sure we're doing the right kinds of trade-offs and the right kinds of analyses. And number two, we've also seen, you know, taking a look, for example, of some of the, the questions that were raised about the proposed intersection 15501 and I-40, that things have a way of coming back, and, you know, roads or solutions that may not ultimately be what the MPO wants sometimes seem to take on a life of their own because they're in a document somewhere. And so I think we have to be really careful that regardless of whether this is a small part, a big part, or no part of the thinking that goes into the ultimate MTP, that we still agree with what's there. So even to the extent that this is congestion management, whether we believe in it or not, it should be done right and in accord with the way this MPO board wants to see the future evolve.
And to add on to that too, I think it behooves us to question the fact of whether this is best professional judgment as of 2024. This may have been the best professional judgment as of 2000 or 1990, but if it's considered best professional judgment in 2024, then we need to question that characterization, I think.
Thank you. I'm gonna let Camille go because her hand's up and it's been up for a second. And then Carl, and then I have a question too.
Thank you so
Camille?
much for recognizing me. I have to underscore what my colleagues are saying.
The problem before with the audio, maybe we're still having that problem.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear her.
Okay, hold on.
We cannot hear you. We had problems with our audio earlier. Could you maybe put your question in the chat?
Okay.
In the chat box.
Can you hear?
Can you put your question in the
about now?
chat? I'm so
Wow.
sorry. Okay, Carl?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So this is a
Sorry,
question.
would you just let me know when the question's in the chat? Thank you. Go ahead.
This is a question for maybe for Doug or again, Ping. So I understand, thank Doug for explaining this. This is part of this CMP process, this part of the federal MVP, like you've got to do this as part of for the feds, right? So I appreciate that. I guess my question is the presentation you made first about the bicycle level of traffic stress, is that connected to the mitigation strategies, or are these two parallel things?
It's part of the recommendation as well. So,
But these mitigation strategies have nothing to do there's bicycle, what is it again? Bicycle level traffic stress everywhere, right? So like, yeah, and you got.
this is a multimodal treatment. I'm sorry, it's very short term. So for example, NC 80 here, champ here, it suggests multimodal treatment or informant. So with this case, if this line, can you please go? Yeah, this is relatively high stress for these sections. So
but I thought the high stress is red, not blue,
Yeah.
right?
This is high stress.
Right.
This is relatively moderate height. So this suggests maybe I think this based on this map relatively high. This suggests multimodal treatment. In other words, you can build a multi path along their suggestion for mitigations.
Yeah, I guess to me, like picking that one chord out of a whole map of red, I just don't understand like why that would be the one they pick.
Yeah, we collect some comment from planners or jurisdiction. We will feedback to them to make revisions of this map. Yeah.
So mine's kind of a follow-up. So to Michael's point around congestion, right? There's all kinds of ways to deal with congestion. One is to deal with the roads. Another is to get less people on the road, which you do with safe bike and multi-trains or whatever. I guess, is there a way to kind of, what you've done is to do the road piece. If we do these things with these roads, we will deal with congestion. What I haven't seen as more comprehensive is if we actually did fund and build the transit we've talked about, the multimodal we've talked about, what does that actually do to congestion? So you've given me one solution with one tool, and I'm just not seeing a solution with the other tools in the toolbox that impact congestion. That's essentially, like, I get that widening a road is one tool in the toolbox, but that's a tool we were saying we don't want. So give me another tool. And the other tools that we have put in our goals, and we've been really, and I know this is like, but I think the problem is that, and I think for those of us who've been in these conversations since that adoption, it just keeps coming back to the thing we say we don't want. And I think that's why you're hearing a little bit of like frustration in the room from this board, is that we're like, we get that that's the tool that you can use, but we don't want that. And so until you can show us maps like this with that same layer of detail of like, okay, and it doesn't matter that we don't have the funding, right? That's not what we're asking for. We're asking for, as electeds, we can't even ask for the funding if we don't even know what it looks like from a policy perspective, from a visioning perspective, like, oh, in a perfect world, right? If we have this, what happens on the congestion side? And then even if it takes forever, then at least from my perspective as a decision maker and a policy maker, I know how to push and where to push. Right now, I don't even know. Like, I just keep getting told the same thing. So it's just this like circular conversation. Sorry. Thank you. Melissa.
And to add to all this, this doesn't take into account the human behavior that is behind all congestion and traffic and transit, and all this kind of stuff, which is if we're designing, as Michael has pointed out before, if we're designing our roads for 2 hours a day, those 2 pinch points are actually what helps get people onto transit and onto bicycles. And if we lack those pinch points, for which we're paying an immense amount of money to try to alleviate, then that loses us a lot of incentive to get the non-carless people onto transit.
Thank you. I'm going to read Camille's comment and then go to you, Danny. Okay, so I want to underscore what both Michael Parker and Melissa McCullough are saying about congestion mitigation. Until we invest significant resources in providing
car alternative options. We will continue to have needs for expanding our roadways. I do believe we have made it clear, sorry, that this is not the priority of this MPO. What is the investment comparison of the other modes of transit? So similar to what's already being said. Danny, go ahead. Thank you, Camille, for your comment.
I really appreciate all this discussion and, broadly, I think share the perspective that is being raised here. One of the things that this map of Chapel Hill and Carrboro in particular makes really clear in this discussion is almost all of these red streets would not be candidates really for increased transit or for widening. These are not, one of, we have a 2-lane road over a lake here, for instance, where that's, I think, served by maybe one route on a park and ride. So pretty well served, all to say, by transit for the needs. This really reflects resident behavior. And so, what we're trying to get our heads around in Orange County all the time is like having this behavior and the desire of our residents reflected in, we're simply not going to get there. We wouldn't even really be talking about congestion management in the terms of this discussion, in terms of alleviating this map where it's red. It just, it's not operative for Calvander, for most of this map. So, all to say, I just wanted to sort of underscore that I really appreciate those points and that the introduction of this, I think, provides the opportunity for just a much higher level framework about what it is that we can do as electeds to address this. Because we're not really talking about that here.
Well, I think we've got some reframing to do in the discussion of what the CMP is meant to be. And better present how the process should incrementally escalate and conceive of adding through lanes as purely the last potential mitigation strategy to be implemented. And then I think we've got some work to do just in the presentation of how the information is conveyed. So I think this is a lot of really good feedback and echoes the MPO's past positions. It gives us a chance to reorganize and to get press and consultants that we brought on board to support this process. Some response.
Yeah, and again, tying things back to land use and something Danny said, if there's no hope of, like you say, a 2-lane road over a lake, well, one mitigation strategy is stop building there. Don't build more houses if you can't provide adequate transportation. And we need to start linking these things to land use and making sure that the constituent jurisdictions of this MP understand some of these challenges. So when they're making land use decisions, they can understand the impacts that their land use decisions have on transit and transportation and vice versa.
Land use definitely impact there. Controls the development board rules. So here the strategy, this here is not means you have to choose it. It's just they think based on their judgment, professional knowledge, it's more suitable, likely more suitable for this corridor, getting it better. But how do you combine this strategy together? It could result another project for that corridor. So that's a thing there. If the widen is not a choice in general, so transit and integrated corridor definitely a top choice for the employment. If you still want to follow this thing. So that's the reason we have this RCM here. It's new. And there's no examples in this region for RCM. And I think when you have multimodal on the corridor, RCM will place an important rules.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything? Okay, thank you. Next up, we have.
This is a detailed description.
Oh,
of the-
Oh, okay, I thought we were done, sorry, I was like, oh, we're moving along, okay. Like, y'all, we're not.
These are
supposed to
details
go
of
on
the
to this
recommendation.
next slide.
We're done with that slide.
So based on the requirement, we have to do analysis for the critical intersections of the ramp to find notice for intersection and ramps. That's a result from this analysis. The result generally based on the 2021 data. You see on the east is US 17 Army. Down south is north of I-40 James Drive or that's not. So if you look this 5501, there are two intersections there. And here is 5501. So that's all intersection based on the 2021 data MPO provide consultants. And the simulation file we provide together with the level of service information. And this pick this intersection and ramp location as a recommendation for further improvement. So the type of improvement is including potential strategy, signal treatment, or line layout at intersection, and also multimodal improvement, including make the cycle length shorter to make it friendly for the bike and ped crossing. So that's the general examples of their recommendation, and details can be found in the meeting package. We have a draft report there.
And you talked a little bit a while ago, you mentioned level of service, and that's typically level of service for cars. Do we have similar kinds of designation in terms of level of service for pedestrians and level of service for bicyclists, both in terms of time and safety?
That's a good question. You remember when I talk about LTS. So before LTS, Florida State DOT has a bike level service. But based on the application situation in the state of Florida, they changing it from the level service to this LTS. So this LTS is our former bike planner suggest to do it. So he thinks this will be a useful measures for our work. So that's for our former bike planner suggest, and he was on board.
So is that incorporated into the designation of intersections that need to be fixed, or the designation of intersections that need to be fixed? Because when I look at, again, cycle length, reduced conflict intersection, signal timing, those are things that are largely designed to make cars go faster. And what about, so when we designate these intersections, for example, would we have an intersection on here where the cars are whizzing through just wonderfully, but it's terrible for bicyclists?
That's very good questions. So number one, we had this multimodal improvement. Where is multimodal improvement from? So we provide the data, not only the traffic content intersection, but also the bike and ped content intersection. When they do the improvement, make this file to get in their mitigation strategy into the file to test how it looks like when they recommend this kind of things there. It counts in the bike and ped movement at intersection.
Right, but I'm asking a somewhat different question, which is typically what I've seen is problematic intersections are defined as problematic because they're a problem for cars. If there are intersections that are fine for cars, but problematic for bicycle or pedestrian, Are those also incorporated in here? And if not, why not?
It's not, maybe next time, next round.
Well,
This time, no.
I think you bring up an inherent issue with multimodal travel at intersections. Intersections are where we attempt to optimize processing as many vehicles as possible.
Or optimizing as many people as possible.
With safety.
Yeah.
Where a mid-block crossing can often allow more time and safer travel, or completely separating the movements. Really is probably the preferred way to increase throughput for non-vehicle travel, but at the greatest expense. So inherently, there are difficulties there. I think that there are probably intersections that are on this map that are better candidates for different things, and that's what the consultant's trying to explain in the recommendations, even if.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get across is that the problem is being defined incorrectly. The problem is being defined as intersections which are inhospitable to cars. That's what those are. And what I'm asking for, are there intersections or other places that may be okay for cars, but they are inhospitable to people, whether they're on bicycles, walking, or whatever, using scooters or whatever.
That's gonna be 99% of
what
are inhospitable to.
But I don't think we have the data, that's what you're saying. I don't think we have the data on that, do we? Yeah, I don't.
You know, you manage what you measure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hold on, Camille's had her hand up. I don't know if we're gonna be able to hear her. So same thing, Camille. I don't think we're gonna be able to hear you. So just put your question in the chat and or your comment in the chat and I'll read it out. I was gonna say something in response to Michael and then okay, call on you, Wendy. And just in general, I mean, some of the examples, depending on what it is, like adjust signal timing is actually depending on what you do with it, can be.
Yeah, it can be, yeah.
Right, because if you give folks longer time, then it gets them, or you give them that initial. I've seen it where it's, you know,
I'm not saying that these things won't help these problematic intersections. What I'm saying is the way problematic intersections are being defined in the first place is incomplete.
Yeah, I agree with you. Also, if it's a bad, I mean, how about this? These intersections, whether they're bad for, like, my guess is they're on a list probably around safety data. So if it's unsafe for a car,
Yeah.
it's twice as much
unsafe for
thing.
people,
So
yeah.
like, I think what would be helpful is actually a prioritization, because my guess is like highway, no. There's certain corridors that we know are deeply unsafe for vehicle, like any transit, right? And so I think one of the things that would be helpful is, yes, we know all intersections are potentially deadly for pedestrians, but then like prioritizing the worst of them for whoever, because I mean, at least with Vision Zero, Vision Zero isn't just for bikes and pedestrians,
No,
it's for everything, right? So I think regardless of where I think any way we look at it, really understanding where's the worst and what are the treatments there for every type of user, and then moving down. That's at least my thinking. And then, okay, Camille, looks like the multimodal recommendations address improvements for pedestrians. And I have another, how are they measuring, the pedestrian conflicts at intersections? Are they using cameras or solely based on crash data? And that's from a resident. Hot mics, I don't know. Okay. Okay, Wendy?
So generally, the database we have data is intersection traffic count data. Some intersection with bike and ped count data. And the crash data nearby on the segments, on the roadway segments. So you have 4 legs of intersection, each leg has associated with crash data there. So that's the current data we have.
One thing that has come up in particular with the big data resources we were using for non-motorized counts or understanding is that that vendor has lost access to some of those data points through, I mean, big data skims how people move from their phones. So when you allow Facebook or whoever to track your movements on your phones, it skims the data from that. And the provider Streetlight that we were using to get some of that information has lost the ability to collect some of that from their subcontractors. So we are trying to evaluate new ways to or other big data resources to better understand active transportation, non-motorized movements. So just so everyone is aware that it's a problem that we've discovered that the industry has encountered, and we're trying to come up with some ideas on how to work around that. Because notwithstanding that, the only way to count people is to go and either set up recurring counters or have volunteers count traffic. It is not an easy data collection task. So.
The other way, if the bike and ped is more important, you can consider to develop a tool, bike and ped tool, special for DCHC MPO, because current model is not suitable for this detailed bike and ped analysis. As Doug said, we had Streetlight subscription, big data subscription. But because Apple and Google tightened the privacy policies, this privacy data we get from them based on the apps, for example, use Facebook or other Google Maps or other related maps, to have this multimodal data is not available now. So the latest data we have is 2022. So we are discussing internally how to solve these issues. So we lost part of source data for bike and ped.
First of all, great conversation, but I do want to acknowledge that this is actually a huge improvement from what we've done in the past. I want to thank the staff. And looking at the full report, we all had input into that. As you were working on it, some of the different measures and recommendations that are shown in the full report, you all had input into that. So I do want to acknowledge that this is, from my memory of being on the MPO, this is actually a lot of progress from what we've done before. My question was, how this is going to be integrated into some of the studies that we're doing right now. So I'm thinking specifically of the US 70 study. And just because looking at the recommended mitigation strategies here, for instance, talks about BRT, improving kind of there's a lot of important recommendations that I think are useful for the 70 study. So just wondering how will this be used for the other work that we're doing?
It should identify opportunities for future or for further evaluation of different alternatives. So we're highlight 70, and that's a corridor we're currently evaluating for some different configurations and solutions. It may just point towards specific potential solutions for other issues that have non-motorized safety, public transportation benefits put first and foremost.
Yeah. So I mean, again, I think these recommendations related to 70 are important. And I have 15501. I guess there are some related to 15501 as well on here. So I'm just thinking about those studies that we're doing. So.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
like,
enjoy it as much as you did.
So I think now we're at reports. I don't have. I actually have a question. When is the joint Campo DCHC MPO meeting?
That is a great question. I believe
May 31st.
we have it held on Friday, May 31st in the morning from 9 to noon is what we have blocked out. We will have refreshments for you here.
It's not, I don't think that's on our.
It's not. Can somebody make sure we get a calendar hold? Because that's one of the reasons I asked is I didn't see it on mine.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
for electeds, this is just a request. Can you all make sure to get those holds out early? So once we're getting into a month out, a lot of us are gonna be booked. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
So maybe go with like formal, like 6 weeks, like think of it as wedding.
We'll try to also set because there are future ones this year we anticipate.
Okay.
So we will try to get those
Thank you.
worked out sooner than later too.
Next up, Nish.
The only update that I have is if y'all are interested in learning about the public process that we're going through this week, how to consolidate 3 CTPs, 2 MTPs, and multiple local plans into one single document. WSP is conducting public engagement this week in Hillsborough, so we'll be putting all our transportation documents in Orange County into one main document and all one set of plans, projects to help do this process. So y'all are all invited.
Doug?
I don't have a lot additionally to add to the report. Tomorrow is the Triangle Trail Initiative Trail Funding and Planning Workshop. That we will be participating in, and I believe that's in Johnston County. During the day, and I do have an additional exciting bit of news. We have recruited and we'll have another staff person joining us in June. So I look forward to introducing Mr. Thomas Porter to you in person. And he'll be supporting a lot of our GIS and data visualization work here. Currently, he is at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Secretary's office. And he is very excited to come to North Carolina and eat barbecue every day. So that we could definitely help that accommodation.
Thank you. Next up, we have Lisa Mathis. I know she's not here, but I know she is. Okay. Brandon?
No reports.
Thank you. Right, or anyone else from Division 7?
Good morning, everyone. Chad
Tell me
McCusker.
online.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. We're having with the sound issue, I guess. Yeah, I apologize. And same with Division 8. I think any
Good morning.
division reports who are online, we will not be able to receive your report, at least in this format. Is there anyone here from NCDOT besides? Right. Okay. Okay, and then a couple of news articles and our next meeting is.
One last thing, at our next meeting on May 28th, we will have a session at the end of it with Fountain Works to talk about their strategic planning exercise that the board will kick off over the next year, calendar year, the rest of this calendar year. We'll have some box lunches here for the board members that can stick around so we can send you with some food. So just be prepared at the meeting.
There's a consultants doing. What boards?
The MPO strategic plan, so our administrative and
Those are
operational.
folks we met with a month or two ago, right?
Yes, they have engaged over some time, and we have a more refined project scope that will be undertaken with them.
So you guys, join if we can for that.
May 28th. May 28th.
It'll be at the end of the MPO board meeting.
And then last thing, just a reminder that the transportation summit is NCDOT Transportation Summit is May 21st through 24th. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.